I've been fortunate enough to have received a review copy from the wonderful guys over at Radiance Films for their upcoming release of the 1976 film Man on the Roof, directed by Widerberg. So in this video, I'm going to give my thoughts, sort of review the film, as well as delve into the extras package that is on the disc, and just to give you an informed sort of opinion on whether this is something that you should think about picking up. The Man on the Roof is based on a novel called The Abominable Man, which was written by Marge Showall and Pere Walou, who were a collaborative couple, writing couple, are very much credited with popularizing Nordic noir or Scandi crime sort of novels. It would later be sort of popularized by Stieg Larsson with his Millennium Trilogy, who had films, you know, adaptations of those in The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. So if you're familiar at all with like Stieg Larsson or Joe Nesbo, for instance, then you sort of know what thing you're going to be getting into here. So the film is set in Stockholm in Sweden and begins with a, quite frankly, shocking and brutal murder of a police lieutenant who is like secretly ill in a hospital, and his assailant attacks him with a bayonet. And then the film is very much a procedural you know, police crime thriller from that point on, where his colleagues pick up the case and try and determine who's done it and why they've done this. As the investigation deepens, we learn that this lieutenant may not have been, you know, the prime candidate for, you know, what a good police officer should be.
Jag kände inte honom närmare. Smit inte undan nu. Vad var han? Han var en dålig polis. Fel. Nyman var en in i helvete dålig polis.
As things develop, many of our detectives and other police officers find themselves in the crosshairs of a armed person on top of a roof who is basically out to kill as many policemen as they can. Personally, I found this film to be very engaging. It has a very gritty, like 70s police procedural feel to it, very akin to maybe a lot of the films that were being made in the 70s in America. But this film very much has its own sense of place and identity to distinguish it from sort of the American like versions of this film. The beginning murder, as I mentioned before, is quite brutal, and even so much so that before it was aired on television in Sweden in the late 70s, the director, Bo Widerberg, chose to film an introduction to explain the reasoning behind having such violence in the film. And yeah, it's a really interesting historical thing to see, like, a director explain their work due to maybe some, you know, backlash as to why was this included and could it not have been done in a different way, sort of thing. Also, the murder also felt at the beginning like it flipped my expectation of what I was watching, because in some ways it felt like a giallo or something out of an Italian, you know, thriller or horror or something like that, with the way it was framed and shot and stuff. And then the film definitely turns into what you would typically expect from, you know, a crime procedural, you know, film or TV show, something like that. I felt that the performances from all the cast were exceptional, and there's a very occasional use of score or like musical cues that only pop up at certain points in the film, and they're very much used to underscore, you know, particular moods or an urgency or the immediacy of the scene that's playing out. And I thought it was well used, and it's really a really effective way to use music, is to not have it very much at all apart from in key moments, and that's very much what it was like in this film. The film itself looks great on the disc. The HD digital transfer was done by Svenk Film Industry, and there's no compression issues that I could notice, which allows for like a really nice, crisp, clean, you know, filmic tone. And, you know, the audio is also really, really crisp, which, you know, just offers the whole package of a nice audio visual high quality for your enjoyment. The disc is packed with special features. So as I mentioned earlier, it comes with a short, I think it's like 3-minute long introduction of the director, sort of explaining his inclusion of the violence at the beginning of the film, which is like 3 minute long, and that was shot for like TV. There are 2 documentaries on the disc, one of which is called With a View to Realism, which is like an 80-minute feature length sort of making of as such, or it's like a deep dive into the production history, and has lots of interviews of cast and crew members. I found a lot of this really interesting and enlightening. I just felt it was a bit long for what it was, a bit bloated maybe, but for, you know, the inclusion of a release like this, to have as much history and context as possible to go with it, I'm all for it. It's just I felt it was a little long, but this was produced in 2004, so it's not a new production, so it's an archival documentary. There's a shorter documentary as well called Bo Widerberg by Karsten Vedel, which is more of a portrait and look at the man himself, which I found interesting. That was a lot shorter, that was like 50 minutes long. There's a very short interview made for Swedish television that was actually made during the production. So while they were making the film, the Swedish television basically interviewed Bo Widerberg while making the film. And then my favorite of all the actual special features is the select scene commentaries by Peter Gilmstad. Sorry about pronunciation here. And he offers great insight into the source material and the authors, you know, who wrote these books. There were many books, I think 10 in this series of interconnected storylines that like Man on the Roof is sort of interconnected with. And yeah, it was just fascinating. Like, audio commentaries is one of my favorite things as a special feature. So yeah, anything like that always gets a bonus from me. And then to round out the special features, you get a trailer, and then like archival materials, like promotional materials, like image reel. For me, this is a good to strong recommendation for something for you to pick up. If anything that I've said is like piqued your interest, then I would highly recommend getting this, particularly as the special features really flesh out the context and giving you an understanding of who the director is. So one of my favorite things is like, almost as much as watching films, is like learning about film history, like who these people were that made these films, and what was their, you know, political views, what were their, you know, philosophies and things like that, and what may have influenced them to make films in a certain way. And all of the special features on this disc give that. So if you're really into like getting a complete picture outside of just what the film shows you, then I would highly recommend picking up Man on the Roof from Radiance. As I said, it comes out on April 19th. Sometimes if you order directly from them on their website, they do ship out slightly earlier, so you tend to get things just a little ahead of street date. I hope you enjoyed this review. I'll leave a link on the screen right now for my sort of coverage of the first 4 Radiance discs that came out, which, spoiler alert, I was very impressed with. But yeah, until next time everyone, take care.